Hey folks, welcome to my channel and welcome to Dublin Airport. Today we're going to be setting up a flight to Glasgow. Very short flight, about 40 minutes, which, well, will not be covered in this video because the video is basically just about Sim Update 15 as a whole, rather than, an actual full flight video. The full flight, the flight setup part's just gonna be a background thing, just so that we have something going on. But that's not the point of this video per se. It's more so how far we have come in terms of performance. Microsoft Flight Sim wise ever since the beginning, and the many setbacks. More than I could count, if we're being very honest. Like, there were many setbacks, especially after Sim Update 5, where they leveled things because they wanted to, release it on Xbox as well. And that's where things kind of derailed because, well, let's say there was a downgrade, visually speaking. Like, there was a major graphical downgrade. If you've been playing Flight Sim 2020 since its release, since the official release of PC, which dates back to August 2020, you're gonna remember that, especially if you played it on ultra settings, you're gonna remember that the sim was much worse. Was much better looking and much worse performing. And that has kind of changed after Sim Update 5, because what happened was, to give the impression that the simulator was running better, they've kind of messed about with the LOD, so the level of detail was heavily hindered in order to create that false impression of performance gains. The gains were all obtained, most of them, the performance gains were obtained on top of objectively hindering the simulator's visual quality. And that was very evident at first. Over time, they've been gradually making that a little less obvious. But if you compare, like, screenshots, like from this current version, SU15, and you compare it with anything pre-Sim Update 5, it is in fact very noticeable how much worse looking it got after, Sim Update 5. The level of detail was never the same. The photogrammetry was never the same anymore, which, then again, I understand why they did it. I do not blame them for doing it because, well, the game as it was a little bit ahead of the time. Let's put it that way. It was like when Windows Vista released and the computers were not quite ready for it. And it's kind of the same with Microsoft Flight Simulator, especially because there was no frame gen back then. There was no DX12. It was still beta, very unstable. So there was a lot that wasn't quite there in many ways. And as developers kept pushing the boundaries of what was possible systems wise and so on, and all the airliners with so many displays and all that, it was getting more and more complicated to actually run a simulator. Borderline unplayable if you didn't have a top of the line computer. Back then I had like my 2070, and I remember very clearly that, well, first of all, it was unplayable with 16 gigabytes of RAM. That was like the first thing that stood out the most and was quite shocking at first when I got into Flight Sim 2020, because my computer was what was pretty okay for most games. I mean, the 2070s was not like top of the line or anything, but I could run the games just fine. I was still rocking full HD, so like every game I would throw at it would run on high ultra, no problem. 1080p is no issue for the 2070 whatsoever. Was no issue, because then again, that was 2020. Bear that in mind. 2020. We're talking about 2020. So I was quite shocked when I loaded up Flight Sim and I tried the airliners, and it was just not really working well. It was below 30 FPS. It was very stuttery, especially around bigger cities like New York City, Frankfurt. That was not going to work, and it didn't work, obviously. It was like 1 FPS, 2 FPS because the RAM was always maxing out. And so I upgraded to 32 gigabytes of RAM, especially because of Microsoft Flight Simulator, because I wanted to have that stutter-free experience, and it worked to an extent, but it didn't fully mitigate it, because even so, even though I had 32 gigabytes of RAM, it would still max out. Depending on the city, depending on the weather, I would still have my RAM max out, which is insane. Like, we're talking about 32 gigabytes of RAM, which back in 2020, like 32 was plenty for gaming. It was plenty. Like 16 would be just fine for most things if you were not like multitasking. I would say maybe Warzone could be on the very much on the edge, but other than Warzone, I think there was nothing really all that demanding. And then Microsoft Flight Sim came into play, and it was like 16 is just not enough for just settings anymore. That was pre Sim Update 5, bear that in mind. When Sim Update 5 came out, the RAM requirements suddenly dropped. Most of the time now, post SU5 that is, I've never seen the RAM usage go above like 25 gigabytes at worst. There are some airports, some sceneries where I see actually still maxed out, and I had issues running out of RAM in a few times before with just my usual set of things open, which is Volanta, obviously, for the flight tracking. What else? Pegasus for the VA, and that's about it. And Microsoft Flight Simulator, and I would still run out of RAM, which was crazy. And the sim would just it doesn't warn you. It doesn't say, hey, we're out of memory or anything. It just kind of closes. Like when you hit the cap, it closes altogether, freezes, and then boom, disappears. I had it happen like a few times. Very rare, but still something that happened. And then as time went by, that was sort of fixed. I never seen it happen again. It's been at least a year since the last time I had an issue running out of RAM, which is good. So now 32 is enough. I would say even 16 if you're not real overly bloated Windows-wise. Like if you don't run a bunch of applications in the background, like obviously you need your web browser for the charts and so on. You know, Volanta, the basics if you're, you know, somewhat hardcore flight simmer. But I would say it's probably possible nowadays to run the game on Ultra, the simulator on Ultra, with all the bells and whistles and, you know, Volanta and so on, and still have it not run out of RAM most of the time. 32 will give you that extra margin, obviously. So I still recommend 32 if you're building a rig for Flight Sim 2020. Go for 32. Don't even question it. But if you only have 16, you can make do now. It's possible. It was not possible back then. Definitely not. Which led me to upgrade. And that was a huge advancement, I gotta say. But it was obtained not through code shenanigans, not through any coding magic. It was just progressively, you know, progressive hindering of the visuals and so on in order to get those figures appear better, you know, make it appear as if it runs better, as if it's further optimized. But that was not the case, really. There was a lot of visual hindering going on so that it couldn't happen. And to this day, still does not compare. If you put the game on ultra settings and compare with what it was before, it still doesn't look better, which you would hope it would look better over, you know, almost 4 years of development, of constant updating. You would expect the simulator to improve, progressively improve, and it has improved in many other ways. So as much as the visuals have not really improved, if anything, they've gotten worse. We've had better physics now. We have better weather. Thankfully, we have better weather now. We have better ground physics, which were upgraded on this last update. We have better aircraft. Uh, Partially, I mean, Zobo has been progressively updating what they can update and what they cannot update. They commission other people to do, like the A320 Neo Bionic builds, which is much better than default. Still not, like, I wouldn't say study level perhaps, but it's way better than whatever the default one was. The model is significantly better. The systems, it's a proper HB airplane now. Don't expect more than that. It's not gonna be like FS Labs or Phoenix or whatever, but it does the job and it's free, which is important. So they've been doing that homework, you know, improving what they can improve. You know, the base sim right now is far more mature than it ever was. That's a good thing. But it wasn't without its hitches. Like, many without as many hitches, let's put it that way. It was very complicated. I cannot say it was an easy process overall. Like, really not easy whatsoever. But, you know, looking back, I would say SU5 overall, SU15, I mean, was a great way to end this whole cycle. You know, it's going to be the last actual SU. We're going to have further updates, but it's going to be mainly just maintenance, just making sure it doesn't break anything. But in terms of further things, we're not getting anything anymore. Which is a bit sad, because obviously the simulator is still far from finished in many ways. We still don't have a working weather radar. They never exposed the weather API to developers, which is a shame. The camera, which people have been complaining for ages, still has not been fixed. They still didn't open the API for developers to maybe try and give it their own twist, which kind of bothers me a little bit. I wish they would, you know, open it up so that Parallel 42 could bring Chase Plane over. Chase Plane was massive back in Flight Sim X and Prepared. It's greatly missed and had things that were far, far ahead of its time. And they would be very much welcome in Microsoft Flight Sim. But Azobo was like, no, we like our camera app, we're not going to be opening up. Which is a shame, because the simulator is supposed to be modular, you know, kind of thing that you just build over time with whatever you want. You know, you should have that freedom, not just from an aircraft standpoint, not just from a scenery standpoint, but also the tools that compose the simulator. They should be modular. You should have that option. Hey, I want a different camera system. I want a different whatever system, even a way to handle all the controls and so on, which we do have, which is FSU, IPC, and so on. But it's based on the modularity, and the modularity is just not there the same way it is on X-Plane, Flight Sim X, Prepared, and so on. You don't have all that freedom. It's more of an enclosed environment where you have some degree of freedom, but not the full spectrum that you would expect from a flight simulator. Because that's the whole point. You know, you build your simulator in a way that works for yourself, and the way that works for me doesn't work for you, and so on. So we should have the right to think out of the box and have our simulators tweak the way we feel like it should be, not the way they feel like it should be. Because at the end of the day, we are the player base. They're just the developers. You know, they do not know better in that sense. The fact they enforce that camera system, they enforce the weather system on us as if we do not know any better, and it's just kind of weird, because we should have the option, we should have the freedom. I mean, I get they think their camera is great, they think their weather is great, so on, but I think they should allow us the freedom to, hey, maybe disagree, respectfully disagree, and, you know, have options. You know, maybe the options are not as good as what comes with the simulator. Maybe a no camera app wouldn't actually be better than the default camera, but we should have that option. They should allow us to, you know, do whatever we want. It should be a sandbox. You know, a flight simulator in its essence, it's basically a sandbox that you do whatever you want. You know, I can do pretty much whatever I want, in the sense that, like, let's say I want to fly Ryanair in America, I can do that. Or I could fly Spirit in Europe, I could do that as well. It doesn't matter. You have, you know, freedom to do whatever you want. I could fly the space shuttle. I could fly the Concorde. I could fly an A380 out of Luton if I wanted to. And that's the magic. That's what's so cool about flight simulators. The fact that you can do things that you cannot do in real life. You know, all the freedom. And the freedom should be going hand in hand with all the other tools as well. Be it camera, like I said, be it further configuration options, effects, and so on. And I feel like Microsoft Flight Sim has been sheltering us way more than other previous iterations of the simulator, which is kind of sad. Understandable, but sad. Like the weather thing, it's mainly a contractual thing. I'm sure there's a license that maybe prohibits Azobo from opening up, because, you know, that data could be sourced. If the API was open, they could source that data without paying for it, and that could cause a whole bunch of other issues, which are far beyond our comprehension. But I do think that for Flight Sim 2024, whenever it comes, I think they should really consider opening some things up, especially on the radar front. Like I said, the API, the camera, like I said, maybe they should open it up. You know, they should give it a try. They should maybe pursue a different licensing where they could do that, where they could open it up ever so slightly. I don't mean opening the whole thing up, just make it so they can actually inject weather the way it should be injected. Like, some developers have worked their way around it to a degree, to a certain degree, like XenViro, Active Sky, Rex. They have all found ways around the limitations, but it's not a full-blown kind of thing. It is there, it is working. I personally use XenViro a lot, and it's fixed the crazy winds on Final. It's fixed a lot of things with the weather, but it does not entirely replace it. It's not like it is a full-blown weather engine running, you know, within the simulator. It's not. You cannot pretend it is, because it's not. They just kind of found ways around it, but it's not like it's a new weather engine. It's not like Active Sky was unprepared on X-Plane. It's not a new weather engine at all. You know, it works around some of the limitations and so on, but it's not. It doesn't have the full control that you would hope it did, which is sad. But then again, it's an Azobo issue, not really much they can do about it. So for Flight Sim 2024, I really, really, really wish they would consider opening things up a little bit more, so that we have a bit more freedom when it comes down to that, to being able to have our simulators operate how we feel they should be operating, not how they feel it should be operated. Because at the end of the day, it's our simulator, it's not their simulator. We are the ones playing it, you know? Like, who's having the experience? Is it me? Is it the Azobo guy? Like, is it an Azobo employee right now that's flying the plane for me, or is it myself? Who is Microsoft Flight Simulator for? They gotta remember that they are building a simulator for the people. A simulator for everyone to enjoy. And if they do not consider that people have different opinions, that people have different ways to go on about stuff, they're gonna run into trouble. And they did run into trouble. That was one of the things, one of the biggest things that was holding Microsoft Flight Sim back. And we cannot deny that the lack of freedom was most definitely one of the major hindrances, one of the things that annoyed people the most. And we just kind of got over it. We just kind of learned to, cope and moved on. Even though it was not how we wanted things to be, we just kind of accepted it for what it is. Because at the end of the day, it's not like we can change it. And obviously, we could resist and stick to explain and prepared and so on. But Microsoft Flight Sim, despite all of its issues, despite all of its many, many issues, it's still great. I'm still having fun. You know, it might not have the things I wanted it to have, which saddens me a little bit. You know, I really wish I had a weather radar and so on, but it doesn't entirely disrupt the experience. And hand flying Microsoft Flight Sim is quite fun, I must say. I really, really like it. Might not have to explain kind of physics and so on, but it's still a very great simulator. It's great fun to fly around. Would it be better if we had that little bit more freedom that people wanted? Yeah, sure, yeah. But as is, I feel like it is pretty solid. It's a solid base. They just kind of need to work on it, and that's what I hope Microsoft Flight Sim 2024 is going to be. I hope it addresses all those weak points that are slightly annoying or slightly, you know, it would be really, really a much better simulator if we had just a tad bit more freedom. If we had that tad bit more, uh, tad bit less of hand holding and more, you know, ability to customize it as we wish, as we desire, rather than having them dictate how the simulator, how the experience should be. Because at the end of the day, it's not their experience, it's our experience. So I really, really, really wish they would reconsider many of those decisions. And I do understand that, like I said before, there's licenses into play, there's a lot into play that is perhaps outside of the reach in many ways. They cannot do much about it. But I really, really wish that they just try and go the extra mile in that sense, because everyone would benefit greatly from that. Developers, players, everyone, really. Imagine if we could have all that we had before repaired, Flight Sim Max, but with these visuals, so on. Imagine how much better the core experience would be if we were not so limited, so restrained. And even though we're so restrained, so limited, developers still found a way around most of that. You know, especially the networking bit. Like you couldn't really have, networking to any extent, and PMDG Phoenix have
Hello, Captain. We are ready
worked
for
their
pushback.
way around it. Phoenix, because they're outside of the marketplace anyway, so they just could do whatever they want in that regard. And PMDG has battled with Microsoft to include networking so that they could finally run, the calculations or whatever, meter fetching and so on, which I believe has done as well
Departure checks completed.
on their
Bypass pin
EFPs,
inserted.
which is something that was not possible at first. You couldn't have any connection whatsoever. You couldn't request a meter or anything like that. And they found ways to do that and have that connectivity so that you could have a scene brief integration as well, which was out of the question at first. Like, it was very shocking when the first airliners released and they were not scene brief integrated. You couldn't have scene brief whatsoever. Something that we were so used to back in the day, having that. It was just something that we took for granted, and then suddenly we didn't have it. We were back to the Stone Age, just like that, for the longest time, actually. You know, something that I took for granted for so long, and then suddenly I was manually importing the flight plans because I couldn't load up my Seabreeze flight plan, and that was like a shocker and a half. Fortunately,
Release parking
that
brake, please.
has now changed,
Commencing push. All engines clear. Start at will.
and we can at the very least have that. Still can have CPDOC maybe one day, but that's more of a not really a Microsoft issue. It's more so something that the developers should be taking care of, BMG and so on. But you know, like I said, Phoenix has it and so on. That's something that does not pertain to Microsoft. Now it does not, but like in the past, that was an issue because it couldn't have connectivity. Now you can, which was a very nice decision. But they should make more of those decisions that benefit us and not just their own interest in a sense. That would be really, 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 really great. You know, if we could have a less restrained platform, somewhere that we could really, really be sandboxing around, then it would be the final nail in the coffin for Explain and Prepared in many ways. Because it's minor stuff, but it's the kind of stuff that keeps people away from trying it. And it's a shame in some ways because even though Microsoft Flight Simulator has its flaws, it does not make it a bad platform by any means. You know, but I do understand why people are so opposed to trying it out because of, you know, what they hear. But like I said, limitations aside, the sim as is, it's pretty okay. You know, like far from perfect, but it's fun. It's fun. I've been playing it a lot, especially after late 2022. Because before that, I didn't really have many hours in sim because it just
Waiting your confirmation for a good
annoyed
engine
me
start.
more than anything. But it's got to a point where, even though it does have its missing bits, the overall experience is very immersive. It's a lot of fun, and I would love to say it keeps getting better, but it's the final major update, so it's not really gonna get better. It's gonna, well, sit what it is right now. I hope the developers kind of, you know, the third-party developers keep improving on what they can improve for their own aircraft add-ons, so that we have an even more immersive experience overall.
Cockpit to ground. We have a
As
good
far as
engine
a
start. You
Zobo
can
goes,
disconnect.
as far as what a Zobo can do, this is the end of the road. You know, it's not gonna improve other than what we currently have. So eyes are all on Flight Sim 2020 now. For 2024, pardon. That's the star of the show now. That's the future. That's what we're all looking forward to and hoping it won't be as
Unlocking
limited.
gear.
It won't be as complicated for the developers to, you know, do what they want to do. You know, to break the norm and bring things that have never been brought
Tow truck
before.
disconnected.
Think
Bypass
outside of the
been
box.
removed.
It's really complicated as is.
Left
Right
is clear.
now.
Right is clear.
Because of the many hindrances, there are many things that I suppose developers want to do, but they cannot do because it's not possible. It's not like, oh, we do not have the know-how, we do not have the time. No, it's more like we cannot do it because Microsoft does not allow us to do it. And that's harsh, you know? When you think of all the possibilities, all the things that maybe we could have gotten, but we can't because the simulators are closed at the platform, kind of annoys me a little bit. And but I'm very hopeful for the near future because I felt like Azobo has been trying like really hard. They have been listening. They have been doing what they can, and 2024 is going to be a new sheet. You know, they're going to be starting over, in a sense. It's a new product, so maybe it won't be bound by the same limitations. Maybe it won't be as tight as 1984 as 2020 was, and that's really good, you know, for the future. it's it opens up many possibilities, many potential possibilities. It might or might not happen, but I'm very, very hopeful for whatever they're gonna cook next, because yeah, I mean, I like Flight Simulator. I've resisted it for quite a long time, but in my opinion, during my time when I was resisting it, I didn't really see potential. Didn't really enjoy flying in Microsoft Flight Sim whatsoever. Over time, it's after so many updates, it's gotten better and better, which is kind of a miracle, because like I remember back during the SU5 days, I was like, Azobo is just ruining the simulator. They're just making things worse as time goes by instead of improving it. Like, I felt like every update was a step back instead of, they were not walking forward. The UI got worse when they made it, when they released the console version, brought the parity. It was just, I mean, I was never a fan of the UI, even pre-console port. But after the console port, it's just gotten worse and worse, progressively worse. To the point it was annoying. But then I got used to it, and I mean, you can disable most of the things that are annoying and obnoxious, like the tooltips and so on. You can get rid of all that crap. At first, it was a major shocker. What the hell is going on? Like, they're making it more of a game than it already was. It was pissing me off massively. I still kept coming back to it, even though it had all of those things that I didn't really agree with. It's still, the best looking flight simulator by far, the best performing as well. As long as you kind of have realistic expectations. I'm gonna say that because like some people try and max it out with computers, they're not ready for it, and then get frustrated. Then they go like, "Oh, explain runs better." I mean, obviously, if you push it, it's gonna be much more demanding than explain and prepared and so on. But if you're realistic about what your hardware can do, it can be quite competent actually. And I've seen like especially on weaker hardware, it can run better than explained and prepared. Obviously, it's not gonna look the prettiest. It's not gonna be on ultra settings or anything, but it's gonna run while explained, and the other ones might not really run. So it is optimized in the sense that you have a lot of scalability. It will scale accordingly to the machine you have, to what you have at hand. If you have a powerful machine, you're going to have, your average AAA mind-blowing experience. If you have something middle of the road, you're going to have a decent experience, nothing out of the ordinary, but visually superior still. You have a low-end machine. It's going to run. I won't say, it's going to be an amazing 60 FPS experience, but it's going to run. It works. And that's the point, I mean, it runs even on the Xbox. Granted, that was not without a lot of sacrifice. They had to cripple the visuals, like I was saying from the very beginning. Had to cripple it big time, but it runs on Xbox. A $200 video game runs Microsoft Flight Simulator. Can you run X-Plane on a $200 video game? No, you cannot. Can you run Prepared? No, you cannot. But you can run Microsoft Flight Simulator. And while, many would argue, like, what's the point of flight simming on a video game? I know. It's not the same. But hey, it's a gateway. It's a gateway drug, quote unquote. It's not a drug, it's a wonderful thing, but it's kind of a gateway drug in the sense that it might inspire you to build a computer. I know a lot of people that started on Xbox and you were like, okay, I do enjoy this. I do enjoy flying airliners. So I might as well build myself a computer. I might as well, go deeper into this rabbit hole and actually, you know, become a flight simmer and do the PC thing stuff like Valenta, VATSIM, and so on. It's a gateway drug. You start with the console and suddenly you find yourself spending $3,000 on a PC and becoming a very hardcore flight simmer. It's a good thing. It brings exposure. That exposure was not there before. So flight sim was kind of gate-capped in a way. If you didn't have the money to spend on a computer, if you didn't have the resources or the know-how, you couldn't really get into flight sim. If you didn't know a person that was into flight sim previously, you probably wouldn't hear of it even. Or you would hear of it but be weirded out because it's complicated. It really is complicated. But then Flight Sim Console made it so approachable, so easy to kind of get into and try and, you know, learn how the airliners operate, and then you find yourself wanting more and more, because that's the joy of flight simming, really. Once it bites, you cannot let go anymore. It's fun. It's really, really, really fun, you know. As you do it for the first time, you want to keep doing it more and more. Oh my god, I forgot the next light. I was so busy talking that I forgot. Oh boy. It's whatever. At the end of the day. I'm sure they saw me. Anyway. The thing is... Oh! I also forgot that I'm not going for 28 left. I'm going for... Oopsie daisy. Kept debut on as well. Look at me. Just yapping about. It's terrible. Let's pretend that did not happen, okay? I was a bit distracted with all the yapping. Oh Jesus! I really need to, you know. I either talk or fly. I cannot do the two things at once. I get confused, overwhelmed, forgot some things, but it's whatever. It really is whatever. Fortunately, I'm flying offline, so no damage. It's the second time it happens, actually. There was a time I was not recording a video, but I was in VC, and I found myself taxing to 28 left instead of taxing to 10 right. What a shame. But yeah, it happens. Anyway, back to the console talk. I feel like it was a necessary move. It was not done in the way that I would have done it myself if I were Microsoft, with the downgrades and so on, because they probably tried to make the console version not look as inferior. I mean, we know it's inferior because video games, the Xbox Series X and Series S are fairly inferior to a top-of-the-line computer. That's obvious. You cannot compare processing power and so on. So they hindered the photogrammetry, the level of detail, so that the gap wouldn't be as noticeable, because they had to really, really squeeze whatever, you know, inch of performance they could out of the Xbox. And that meant really, really going above and beyond what they could deteriorate in order to make it so the computer version is not all that much superior visually speaking, so that there's some sort of parity there. That was a mistake in my opinion, but I understand why they would do that. So it could detract maybe people from, why would I buy it on console if it looks so much worse, and if it's so much better on PC, like what's even the point in spending money on a console version if it's clearly inferior? So they tried to shoot, they aimed for the parity. Somewhat, they kind of got there. PC obviously still looks better, especially if you have a 4090. I mean, there's no comparison, obviously, but it still does not compare to the graphics that we had back in SU4, SU3, and so on. It does not compare. It's a whole new league, and it's whatever at the end of the day. Like, I understand why they did it. I do not like the fact they did it. but I don't fully blame them for doing it, because at the end of the day, it's all about money, really. And porting it to console was needed because, like I said, it's a gateway drug. You have to get more people into flight simulation, and getting into flight simulation pre-console version was a bit complicated. You know, you needed a computer, you needed exposure to it, which honestly, I mean, there was not a lot. I mean, we had creators so on promoting flight sim, but they never had massive reach or anything. So Microsoft Flight Sim for console did a very good job of promoting it, expanding the word, spreading the word around about how much fun it is to fly virtual planes. They played an essential role there, which PC by itself could have never gotten it that far, really. I mean, just look at the numbers before it was available on console and after it was available on console, how much is sold on Xbox, and how many new people it brought into the hobby. It's just night and day. It was a great service. They provided a gateway drug that made people realize, hey, this is actually fun. You know, it's not nerdy stuff. It's actually super fun to fly an airplane. I can get behind this. Like, maybe, you know, maybe I should really invest and buy gear, maybe even a PC, maybe become a streamer. It inspired a lot of people. So I would say the growing pains of Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 were extremely needed. And the execution was not perfect, but it was absolutely needed for the greater good. You know, they had to do it so that more people could enjoy the hobby, so that more people would appreciate flight simulation, so that the market would be larger, thus allowing, you know, developers to bring better products, to make better stuff, to feel motivated to go above and beyond what is possible with all the limitations that are present. So honestly, yeah, I mean, it was tough. It was almost 4 years of frustration, anger, and disappointment, which then transformed into a really, really good experience. You know, all the problems aside, I cannot be like, oh, I did not enjoy Microsoft. I did. I've been enjoying it. I've been having a great time. And I feel like, all things considered, Microsoft, Azobo especially, has done a great job. You know, it's not what we had in mind when they announced the simulator in 2019 at E3. You know, I would be lying if I said it turned out into what I had in mind back then. But it doesn't mean it's a bad thing per se. You know, it doesn't mean
Positive rate of climb.
just because it turned out differently doesn't mean that Azobo and Microsoft have failed at creating something that is really, really good. You know, it's not FAA certified. It's not the ultimate flight simulator, but we never expected it to be, really. I'm gonna be honest, like, when it was announced, I was concerned it would be fully arcadey, and that it could never be used as a serious simulator. And during the first couple years, it was kind of like that. You know, 2021 especially, post SU5, I was like, okay, this thing is never gonna be a serious simulator. There's no way I'm using this for my actual flying. I'm going back to prepare, and I'm going back to my good old trusty FS Labs. Like, there is no way in hell I'm using this. Honest to God, there's no way in hell. And look at me now. Look at me now. I have almost 3,000 hours on Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020. So, the things I learned is that A, never say never, and B, they have somewhat redeemed themselves, really. As much as, you know, it might not be what the hardcore simmers wanted, but at the very least it didn't turn out into what we feared the most. Because, like, me and a huge part of the fan base were actually very concerned about its future, how it would turn out post what happened with SU5. You know, and all the gamification with the UI changes and all, getting more and more console-like, transforming more and more into a console-like experience. I was very scared, very concerned, and now I'm not, because, well, it won't be getting worse than that. It's the final update. It's the end of the road as far as, you know, support goes. Not support, because it's still going to be supported for the next 5 years, I think. But as far as improvements go, as far as, you know, development goes, it's the end of the line. It's the end of the road. It's not going to change. You know, they're just going to make sure it still works. You know, compatible with driver updates and so on, but that's it. And it didn't really become a video game per se. The physics might not be stellar, but they're solid enough. Especially on payware stuff. It just works. Really just works. And cannot say I hate it or anything. Like I said, I would have done a lot of things differently. If I were under the helm, I would have taken different decisions. But overall, compared to what I feared back in 2020, like when it was announced, because it could have turned out much worse. It could have turned out much more arcadey. It could have kinda never cared about the payware industry. They could have never listened to the developers and updated the sim to accommodate some of their wishes. They had to do a lot of accommodation, especially because the SDK was terrible at first. And they fixed the SDK over time, over the years. But initially it was just a nightmare to work with. I remember, like, many developers, especially PMDG, complaining about how terrible the SDK was, how limited it was. Oh, they couldn't really do what they wanted to do at the time. Like, complex airliners were not possible at first. Like, it was just not something that could be done because the SDK was that bad. You know, the SDK was so bad that they couldn't really implement the things that had to be implemented in order to have a proper working airliner. And they've obviously changed that. You know, Azobo listed, they accommodated many of those wishes, and now we have a simulator that, well, while far from perfect, it's also satisfying enough. It's fun enough. I've been flying all over PMDG, Phoenix, been enjoying myself. Great type performance is great, especially after Sim Update 15, which has brought further improvement to the frame rate, to the overall performance. There's less starting out final now. There's more frame rate on glass cockpits. So anything with a bunch of screens going on, it's going to be running better now post SU15, which is awesome. So it's a great send off, you know. They didn't really finish the platform as we wish they would. It doesn't feel like a complete simulator experience, but it's almost there. It's more than halfway there. It's 7% there, let's say. Fun enough, playable enough, and I feel like they've learned a bunch from this. It was their first thing though, as far as flight sim is concerned. You know, Zobo's first simulator, They had experience with open worlds, and so that's probably why Microsoft hired them, because they wanted someone that could, like, a massive open environment that was good looking, good performing to an extent. But the simulation part was something that was not within their reach. But they've learned, they've improved. Some of them even, got licenses, pilot licenses. So they really, really cared. They really wanted to improve it as much as they could. And I think they did. All things considered, if you take their background into account, and at the time, the timeline, it's, I don't know for how long it was under development before the release in 2020, but within 4 years they took a simulator that was kind of sad. It had the visuals going for it, but other than that, not really. I mean, the weather was mostly for show. It's not overly accurate or anything. It had a cloud, sun. The clouds were beautiful, and that, and all that. But they were not realistic. They were not depicting the real meteors in the slightest. It was a bit off. The physics were just, it was like flying sausage with engines. It was not fun at all to fly in Microsoft Flight Sim. Even the smaller airplanes just kind of fell off. They've come a long way in that regard. They've improved a lot. And I feel like that the baggage that they kind of built up over the years will definitely come in handy for Flight Sim 2024. I'm sure they will take all they learned, and other things the community has asked for as well. I feel like now that they are starting over again with a new project, I feel like maybe they will start considering that from the very beginning. Most of that feedback, especially like I said, regarding the closed things that should be closed, weather, camera, and so on. Maybe for 2024, it's not going to be the case anymore. Something they couldn't really change Microsoft 2020 without major rewriting, major licensing problems. Maybe they will finally have that in mind for 2024 and open up the possibilities for developers to improve the simulator, to make it more modular, because I feel like that's what sim developers should aim for. Build platforms that are modular, that you can change as you want, that you can adapt to your needs. And it can only be done if you open most of the doors. Granted, some doors cannot be opened, understandably so, and that goes for any platform really. There are things that they cannot open up. But there are things that you should open up, and that Azobo has not opened up in 2020. But yeah, overall, I'm pretty happy how the simulator turned out. Really, could have been better, but it's not too shabby at all. And, it's fun to play. Been playing it every day for the past 2 years, I think, and I have no regrets. As much as I wish it could be a bit better, it doesn't bother me all that much, really. Because at the end of the day, they wanted to build something that was for everyone, not just us. The serious quote-unquote simmers. They wanted something that was approachable, that any person could get into and enjoy. I feel like they found a great middle ground that satisfies us both. The advanced quote-unquote users and the ones that are starting right now that have no understanding of how airplanes work. They just want to have fun. They just want to fly over their houses and have a great time. And I feel like they struck somewhat decent balance. Most of the things that were an issue, major issue, like game-breaking issue, were addressed, like the crashing, which was very common before Sim Update 9. It happened more often than you count, and it had performance degradation as well, which was terrible. So you would fly for like 4 hours, and then suddenly your frame rate would go from like 50 to 5 FPS out of the blue, no apparent reason. They would just drop massively, and it was not so uncommon actually, which made long hauling basically impossible without putting up with low frame rate and final. They fixed that. It doesn't crash anymore. I lost count of the last time it crashed on me. Amen to that. Never had it crash anymore. Makes me very happy, obviously. Because stability, more than anything, I think it's a core kind of thing. It doesn't matter if your simulator is perfect, if you have like best physics, best everything, if it's not stable. Stability is key, and it does have that stability. Fortunately enough, it does have that. It's very, very stable. It has been very stable as of the past year or so. Never had it crash on me. Like the times I had it crash, it was probably scenery conflict issues. Nothing that was Microsoft's fault per se. So in that regard, thumbs up. They have really, really outdone themselves in that sense. Because comparing how unstable it was and how stable it is now, it's night and day. Night and day. Something you can safely use for long hauling, you can safely use for doing many legs without reloading the simulator. No, it's not going to crash. It's rock solid. That is something that some simulators failed at really having that. You know, explain 11. It's very unstable. 12, I had never heard much, but probably unstable as well. 11 was a nightmare. Like I remember my friends complaining a lot about Explain 11 crashing, and I used Explain 11 a bit. Had my fair share crashing as well, but my main sim was prepared, which, God, did it crash. Oh boy, did it crash. More than I would like to admit. It did crash quite a bit, but I had fun. Had fun. But yeah, it was a bit of a crashing mess. Flight Sim 2020, as is right now, it's not really a crashing mess whatsoever. It's really stable, as is. So I would say Azobo has left us a very solid platform. And we can only hope that 2024 is going to be that and more. Hopefully, you know, by more, I mean the things that were not quite great in 2020. I really wish they would make it so more of a polished overall, you know, generally speaking, more polished platform than it is currently. But considering all the fears of Fjord, I cannot really complain. Really, it turned out much better than I ever imagined. Didn't turn out perfect, but it also was not the outcome that I was expecting at first. And it was Microsoft money and Azobo not having any experience with flight simulators made me very concerned at first. It's like, are they sure they're going to be able to do that? It's like, you know, Lockheed Martin, they build airplanes. Lambda Research, the CEO, the owner, flies an airplane. He built his own airplane, for crying out loud. They kind of know their stuff. And Azobo, well, I guess they're French, and they have some experience with PS3 games and so on, but that was it. You know, simulation-wise, they had no background, so it was a bit concerning. It's like getting, I don't know, a coffee company to build a rifle kind of thing, you know. Sort of the same thing. Or I don't know, a keyboard company to make a graphics card. Kind of the same type beat. And they learned along the way. They suffered a bit. They had their mishaps. But it turned out great. It turned out great. Way, way greater than people were hoping it would turn out. You know, they went out of their way. They really showed that they cared and that they were trying to improve it over the years. And, their final major patch, while far from perfect, is really not terrible in the sense that it shows that Microsoft Flight Sim has not really turned into a arcadey experience. It can be an arcadey experience. It can also be a very competent simulator. You know, it can be quite competent if you disable auto assists and so on. If you use Payware aircraft, Payware this and that, it can be highly competent. So yeah, it's just really great. It didn't turn out how it could have turned out in a negative manner. You know, it ended everything at a very high note. A very fortunate ending. So really cannot complain at all as to how it turned out. That being said, I think that's enough talking for this video. If you guys enjoyed it, I was mostly like recapping, going back and forth as to why I feel like, you know, Sim Update 15 was great overall. You know, my previous experiences with the simulator, my understanding of the turn of events, my opinions on some of those choices that were made, things that annoyed me about the simulator, things that I do appreciate about the simulator. Perhaps lessons going to go for the future. Yeah, it was mostly just my occasional rambling, really. A favorite simulator, despite everything. You know, as much as I would love to say I still prefer prepared, it would be a lot because I have much more fun. Microsoft Flight Sim, the variety is just higher overall. You know, the fact that you have the satellite imagery everywhere makes such a difference as well. So satisfying, so great. I really cannot emphasize it enough how cool that was. You know, the fact that he added that satellite imagery everywhere and so on. Much of a game changer that was as well. Back in 2020, how it still is now in 2024, going on 2025, still going to be next level. How the developers got together to help build a platform that we can really enjoy every day. So yeah, with all that being said, I bid my farewell. You guys enjoyed it, because I sure did. I love talking about Microsoft Flight Simulator. You know, I've recorded many videos about it over the years. Should have maybe recorded more, really, but you know how life is. Sometimes we get busy, but I hope you all take care. As usual, feedback's much appreciated. Comment sections right down below. Don't be shy. Share your opinion, because I'm sure, especially as far as Flight Sim 2020 is concerned, I'm sure people have many opinions, many diverging opinions on the matter. Flight Sim 2020 is the kind of thing that you either like or hate. There's no in between. You know, some people feel very strongly about it in negative manners. People really like it. It's really complicated. There's a lot of misinformation as well regarding how accurate its physics are and flight model and so on. But yeah, with all that being said, I should probably sign off for now because, well, we gotta land the airplane, and like, you know, we're not supposed to be talking when landing the airplane. Gotta be concentrated, otherwise we might crash. So stay safe, bye bye, and see you guys hopefully soon.